Welcome, my darling creatures of the night. Tonight, join me as we unravel a twisted tale of vanity, obsession, and the curses that cling to mirrors stained with secrets. I am Violet Nocturne, your guide through the Veil of Shadows, and this is Echoes of the Dark. Our story begins in a small, dim-lit antique store, tucked away in a corner of a desolate street. The store is called Curio's Cache, a crumbling edifice filled with dust-coated relics, each whispering tales of its own sinister past. On this particular day, Olivia, a young interior designer in her late 20s, steps through the creaking door. Her eye captures immediately the centerpiece of the store, an antique mirror as tall as her own frame and encased in an ornate blackened silver frame carved with unsettling motifs. Roses, intertwined with serpents and faces, warped, twisted human faces that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Olivia had been searching for a statement piece for her studio's gallery opening, and this mirror seemed to call to her, its surface rippling like black water in her peripheral vision. "How much for this?" she asked the shopkeeper, a gaunt man whose skin seemed to hang from his bones like ill-fitting clothing. "That mirror," he croaked, his tongue darting out to wet lips that looked as though they hadn't felt moisture in decades. "It's not for the faint-hearted, miss. It has a way of showing more than you bargain for." The shopkeeper's eyes bore into her with an intensity that made her skin crawl, but she wasn't going to back down. She swept dust from the surface to reveal her reflection. Her straight auburn hair and emerald eyes gazed back, but something was wrong. In the mirror, her eyes blinked a fraction of a second after she did, and behind her, the shopkeeper's reflection wore a grin that split his face like a wound, stretching impossibly wide to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. She spun around. His face was neutral, almost bored. That night, the mirror dominated her bedroom wall, its presence somehow filling more space than its physical dimensions should allow. As she drifted off to sleep, the whispers began, not in her ears, but in her mind, like fingernails scratching against the inside of her skull. "Olivia, look. See what you could be?" She jolted awake to find her reflection already sitting up, staring at her with hungry eyes. Behind it stood a figure draped in shadows that seemed to drink in what little light remained in the room. Its head tilted at an impossible angle, and though it had no face, she could feel it smiling. The figure raised a hand of twisted bone and sinew to where its lips should be, and her reflection's mouth stretched into that same impossible grin she'd seen on the shopkeeper. Night after night, the mirror's hunger grew. Her reflection began to move independently, watching her as she slept, pressing against the glass as if testing its boundaries. Sometimes she'd catch it wearing clothes she didn't own, sporting wounds she didn't have. The worst was when it would stand perfectly still, not mimicking her movements at all, just staring with eyes that grew darker and more hollow with each passing night. Desperate, she sought out Emmeline, an art restorer known for her expertise in cursed artifacts. The woman's face went ash white when she saw the mirror. "This is Eleutheryon's work," she whispered, fingers tracing ancient runes hidden in the frame. "He didn't create mirrors to reflect. He created gateways to trap souls. The reflections you see are the previous owners, their essence consumed and twisted by the mirror's hunger. And now it's chosen you as its next feast." That night, Olivia armed herself with a hammer, determined to destroy the mirror. But as she raised it, her reflection moved first, its hand shooting out of the glass to grasp her wrist. The touch was like ice burning into her flesh. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped as she watched her own face split into that familiar, terrible grin, now understanding why it had looked so wrong on the shopkeeper. "We've been so hungry," her reflection whispered, its voice like breaking glass. "So many empty years, watching, waiting. But you're perfect, young, vibrant, full of life. And now you're going to share it with us." The glass rippled like black water as dozens of hands reached out, pulling her in. The last thing Olivia saw was her reflection stepping out into her world, adjusting its skin like a new outfit, while she joined the twisted gallery of former owners trapped in the mirror's dark realm. Months later, when concerned friends finally checked her apartment, they found Olivia, perfectly composed, apologizing for worrying everyone. She'd just been busy with work, she explained, smiling that too wide smile. The mirror hung proudly in her living room now, and if visitors noticed how their reflections sometimes moved wrong, or how the faces in the frame seemed to silently scream, they never stayed long enough to mention it. And so, my darling creatures, next time you catch your reflection moving a moment too late, or see something shift in that antique mirror you adore, ask yourself, are you looking at your reflection, or is something else looking back at you? This is Violet Nocturne, reminding you that some reflections are better left unseen.